A few days ago, something pretty intense went down on the Jubilee platform. Jordan Peterson, a well-known thinker, had a debate with 20 atheists. The whole thing was kind of messy, honestly. Even the host changed the title halfway through. First, it was one Christian versus 20 atheists, then switched to Jordan Peterson versus 20 atheists. And by the end, nobody was really sure if Peterson is a Christian or not. What made this debate interesting wasn't just the clash of beliefs, but the deep questions they were wrestling with. Peterson threw out some big claims that sparked a lot of back and forth. Today, I'm diving into his third claim, which ties into some of the biggest themes in philosophy and psychology. We will discuss who came out on top, what did Peterson really mean, and why does it matter for anyone thinking about meaning, faith, or human nature? Keep in mind, this is my perspective on that debate, and your opinion might differ. So watch this with an open mind, and let me know what you think in the comments. My next claim is that everybody worships something, including atheists, even if they might not know it. This was Peterson's third claim. One of the female participants, Gina, stepped in and challenged the idea. She didn't attack, but she did something important. She asked a clarifying question. What do you mean by worship? Peterson then gave his definition. He said worship is essentially about prioritizing. It's about having a preference over one thing rather than another. According to him, it's a hierarchy of values, and what you focus your attention on most is what you are effectively worshiping. He explained that this hierarchy drives our choices and behavior, so whatever you're attending to, you're worshiping, he said. The same question was asked by another participant named Gerard, who asked, if he keeps his wife as a priority, then according to Peterson's definition, is he worshiping her? And Peterson said yes. Now here's where I think things got a little shaky. In my view, Peterson confused the concept of valuing or deeply caring about something with the theological and spiritual act of worship. There's a big difference. In most theistic, especially monotheistic, not religions, worship isn't just about preference or emotional investment. It's an obligation, a sacred duty. Worship involves prayer, ritual, submission, devotion to a higher, transcendent power, not just valuing something highly in your personal life. So, when Peterson equates prioritizing your spouse, career, or even a hobby with worshiping it, it feels like a philosophical stretch. At that point in the debate, Peterson seemed to get a bit confused himself. And to be fair, it was a chaotic, high-pressure moment. Imagine being surrounded by 20 atheists, all eager to challenge your claims, picking apart every word you say. He essentially tried to place the entire structure of human priorities into a spiritual hierarchy, where the top thing you value becomes your God. But that logic doesn't fully hold up. Still, I do agree with him on one core idea, that many atheists do end up worshiping something in a broader psychological or philosophical sense. That point isn't new, and several major thinkers have said the same thing. Friedrich Nietzsche, for example, warned that the death of God would leave a vacuum. Without religion, people would be desperate to find meaning elsewhere, in ideology, politics, materialism, or even celebrity culture. He feared that without finding a new source of meaning, society would spiral into nihilism and chaos. In many ways, that prophecy has come true. In today's world, technology has almost become a god. It dominates our time, attention, even our emotions. Ray Bradbury beautifully portrayed this in his novel, Fahrenheit 451. In that dystopian world, TV became the new deity. When the protagonist, Montag, asked his wife to turn off the giant TV screens, she screamed, "It is my family!" The screens had replaced human relationships, moral responsibility, even inner reflection. People were emotionally attached to them, blindly loyal, just like worshipers. And that, to me, is what real modern-day worship looks like. It's not kneeling in a church, mosque, or temple. It's in our obsessions, our compulsions, our replacements for God. So yes, Peterson had a point, but his way of explaining it led to confusion. He blurred the line between loving something and worshiping it, and that weakened his argument. But the deeper message, that humans are meaning-seeking beings and will always place something at the center of their life, still holds true. But Gerard called out happy nihilists regarding this in the end of his portion, a topic I will discuss now. I don't recall Gerard's exact words, but at one point, he asked a question that cut right to the heart of our modern existential crisis. If life has no inherent meaning or purpose, does that mean we're incapable of ever being truly happy? Peterson responded in his usual serious tone. Yes, that's what we call nihilism. He explained that when people lose their sense of meaning, or worse, never find it, life becomes directionless, empty. And that kind of emptiness is not just emotional, it's spiritual, psychological, and existential. But Gerard pushed back with a fair counterpoint. There are happy nihilists too. People who accept that life has no inherent meaning and still live joyfully. And here's where I want to pause and share my perspective. Some of you, especially those who followed me from the start, might already know how often I've spoken against nihilism. I've even said before, there are no truly happy nihilists, and I still stand by that. Those who claim they are happy nihilists are either in a temporary phase of distraction where the deeper questions haven't caught up to them yet, or they're lying to themselves, numbing that inner voice that keeps asking, what's the point? The truth is, humans aren't wired to live without meaning. And if you don't give your life a meaning, sooner or later, the darkness of that void catches up with you. Even literature, the deepest kind, knew this long before us. Dostoevsky gave us characters like Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment, a man who embraced nihilistic ideas and tried to become what Nietzsche later called the Übermensch, a man above conventional morality. But Raskolnikov couldn't bear it. His guilt crushed him. Why? Because at his core, he was still human. He needed something to believe in. Leo Tolstoy, another literary giant, went through this same crisis in real life. Born a theist, he became an atheist in his youth, and by the time he reached the peak of his success, wealth, fame, everything, the weight of nihilism hit him hard. So hard, in fact, that he contemplated suicide. If you haven't read A Confession by Tolstoy, I strongly recommend it. It's his personal journey to understand why, even with everything a man could dream of, he still felt hollow. And he found that the absence of meaning was at the root of all his suffering. Now, back to the debate. Gerard, to his credit, asked one more tough question. But aren't many religious people also unhappy? Peterson's reply here surprised even me. And I think it was one of his few most beautiful answers in the whole debate. He said something like, suffering is part of life, and it's through suffering that a man is shaped, not happiness. Suffering reveals what kind of man you are, or could become. That's powerful, because it's not about anything specific guaranteeing happiness, it's about how meaning allows you to face pain without collapsing. I also want to mention Nietzsche here, the very philosopher often associated with existentialism. Nietzsche was terrified of nihilism. He saw it as Europe's incoming crisis. He warned that without belief in God or in some higher meaning, people would fall into despair. Even though Nietzsche rejected traditional religion, he still saw the need for meaning. He knew that without it, chaos follows. From a religious perspective, Gina asked Jordan Peterson, after he explained the hierarchy of prioritization, about the concept of God itself. The discussion became more heated when another participant named Danny engaged with Peterson on a similar topic. That's what I'll now discuss. At one point in the debate, Gina asked, if we all prioritize different things in life, and if worship, as you define it, is about what we attend to or place at the top of our value hierarchy, does that mean there are multiple gods? It was a fair question, especially after Peterson had been explaining his concept of worship as attending to something, placing it at the top of our personal hierarchy of values. For him, what you care about most, what you sacrifice for, organize your life around, that is what you're worshiping. It was not a good definition of worshiping. But Gina asked him about the singularity of God and not having multiple gods, as Peterson's definition was implying. To which Peterson clarified that it's more accurate to think in terms of multiple values rather than literal gods. Everyone has a hierarchy. You might place your career, your family, your status, or your comfort at the top. And in that sense, whatever is at the top becomes your God. It doesn't mean there are literally multiple gods floating around. It means people organize their lives around different ultimate concerns. So when Gina followed up by asking what makes a good Christian, Peterson brought it back to the idea of self-sacrifice. To him, a good Christian is someone who gives up their lower-order desires to serve a higher ideal. And that often involves suffering, personal discipline, and moral responsibility. But then things got tense. Danny stepped in, and I'll be honest, from where I'm sitting, it felt like he was there to stir things up more than contribute meaningfully. He started challenging Peterson aggressively, especially about Mary and Catholicism. "So you think Catholics worship Mary?" he asked. Peterson, trying to clarify, said that yes, Mary might be high in the hierarchy, but she is not at the top. That should have cleared it up. But Danny kept pressing, cutting him off, throwing around lines like, "You just said it, now you're taking it back," and even challenging Peterson's personal faith, saying, "Are you even a Christian?" At one point, Danny may have crossed a line by saying, "You are quite nothing," and after that, Peterson ended the conversation with him. Now you can have your own view, but personally, I found Danny's tone unnecessary and immature. He didn't seem to grasp the distinction Peterson was making about hierarchies of attention versus actual deification. Or maybe he did and just chose to ignore it to create tension. Compare that with Gina or Gerard, who I think stayed professional, asked tough but thoughtful questions, and genuinely seemed interested in the philosophical depth of the discussion. But Danny gets the clicks. And that's what our media thrives on now. Outrage is the new intelligence. Emotional outbursts get more engagement than reasoned thought. And sadly, that's the platform we're debating on. Anyway, this was my take on that third claim, the idea that everyone worships something. If you liked this breakdown and want a full video where I unpack the whole debate, claim by claim, drop a comment and let me know.